Against intuition, a bathroom also requires activities one wouldn't necessarily associate with it, and it's woodworking. And the floors come up a few centimeters, but this cutout, in fact all the cutouts for the hinges haven't, so I have to take a measurement from the lower edge of the cutout to where the floor now is, which is 18.7, and I'll just take away another 2 millimeters to be sure, so that lands me with 18.5. And as things are at the moment, from the lower edge of the door to the lower edge of that hinge cutout there, it's 20.5, so my floor has come up by 2 centimeters, actually probably more, because this door never really reached down all the way to the floor in the first place. Now just to turn it around, so now my 18.5 cutout is exactly where I made the mark there. I will then have transferred that using this sliding square here up to this edge at the top, and assuming that the sides of the door are actually plumb, I could use this T-square here, press that against the side of the door, and then mark my new lower edge of the door. And that is what I need to cut away before I start sanding, etc. It's only 2 centimeters, but still it's less material I have to sand and paint. Because this bathroom is very light, the only colors really in here are white and sandstone. I decided to go with a walnut countertop. This one is actually solid to facilitate varnishing several times to seal it off from the moisture in here, which would be impossible with the kind of countertops you get in IKEA. So all I need to do now is get my center lines so that I can center the sink nicely on top of those, then scribe around the drain, and then use the template that came with that sink, make the cutout, and then go about varnishing it. Now I've given this worktop a few goings over with the sander, first with 80 then 120 grit. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to slightly make the wood damp, and this is just to get all those tiny little hairs and fibers that the wood has to come up, which will make the wood really rough again. And then I'm going to sand those off with 120 and 240 grit, and that should then give me a nice smooth surface to apply the first layer of clear varnish. So this is now dried off, and wetting this wood has had the desired effect. Those little hairs and fibers have come up, which otherwise would have happened after the first coat of varnish. So rather than sanding varnish, I'd just like to sand this back down to smoothness and then varnish. Pretty happy with that. I know everybody working with wood says the same, but I do like how the varnish brings out the grain, the color of the wood. And once the varnish has set and solidified, it just gets a nice light sanding with 400 grit sandpaper just to really polish it before the next rounds. And then after that, just a little bit of white spirit is applied to just make it shine, and that is then ready to go in. Now, while I could be admiring this nice countertop, never mind, the stick is still on there, no handles on the drawers, and the drawers sticking out because that isn't the right waste pipe knuckle in there. What I'm looking at is a naked window frame, and the cyst in here, and a big chunk of walnut right over there. So I have to make that fit over here. Now the basics are pretty simple. This is 125.5 across and 36 deep. 36 deep, and I want the window board to stick out about 2 centimeters, so I'm looking at a 38 centimeter depth. Now, I want this to be my room facing edge. So I'm going to take 38 centimeters from here, which gets me to about here. I'm cutting away a pretty big chunk, and this thing is 65 centimeters across. This 38, so I'm still looking at what is it, 26, 27 centimeters on this side here. So I have to come up with an idea to utilize this wood here, maybe some shelves or something, not quite sure yet. In any case, that side's got to go. That's what I'm doing now. This is a bit of a complex shape, so next thing is to either take measurements all around or make a template from cardboard. These shapes aren't very regular. The walls aren't straight, so there's little differences everywhere, and probably better to do a template than try and measure all of this. One issue that is pretty obvious right away is the window clearance. So that's about 5 centimeters right there. And this countertop is almost as thick as this floor. So that would only leave clearance of about 1 centimeter. So I think the edge here, the one that sticks out by 2 centimeters, that can stay in its original thickness. The rest should probably be reduced to 3 centimeters or possibly 2. Now I've got to figure out how to do that without a planer thicknesser. And I'll start by measuring my 2 centimeters right there. That's the edge I want to stick out over the tiles. That's really not easy to do with just one hand. So I'll just make myself a pencil mark there, or a pencil line. I think I'm going to do kind of like a groove cut with my track saw, because no matter how I'm going to reduce this thickness, this bit here needs to stay, and I want that marked out with more than just pencil. Now, in order to do a groove cut, I have to reduce the cutting depth here. I'm just quickly going to do that down to, let's say, 25 mils. Further down, 20 mils, as indicated there. Push this down. Right, and this gives me minimal cutting depth. So there's of how much I would want to take away. Now I see two ways to do this. Either to move my guide rail down by, I don't know, let's say a few millimeters, make another cut, make another cut, make another cut, and then to just break those very thin strips out with a hammer and sand them or plane them down afterwards, or try to plane all of this down. And as is evident from this clip here, I went with option number 1 and made a number of groove cuts. Now time to test the theory and see whether this plan of mine actually works. Let's say that's a yes. So here's what the thinned and slightly planed underside now looks like. The cut grooves are still visible there, but I don't mind that too much. It's all going to be sealed with varnish. And now I've just made myself a cardboard template the exact size of this piece of walnut. And now I'm going to take the outline of my window frame on this and then later transfer it onto a piece of walnut there and then make the cuts. So I managed to cut out my plank and fit it in the recess, but there's quite a considerable gap here on this side. It's about 5 mils on the front. So what I'll have to do is fill this, cut me a sliver of another piece, and then reduce it down until it fits here, glue it against this piece, just to close that ugly gap there. But other than that, I think this works quite nicely. It's a nice, solid, deep window board, and once it's been given the same varnishing, sanding and varnishing treatment as this, the grain should pop out a whole lot more and make it really look quite nice. So to close that gap, I cut myself that sliver, which broke along one of the grain lines here. And this is just about thick or thin enough in the right spots to fit in that gap between the board and the wall. So what I'll do now is I'm going to glue that to the board, like so, and then later I'll cut it to the same kind of L shape that this has, and that way then that should fit in again. So I did make a small cutout and just wood glued this to the main piece. Unfortunately, I think it was the moisture in the wood glue that made this a little cupped. So there was now a gap between this little sliver and the main piece that wasn't there before. So I just filled that with wood filler, slightly different color than my dark walnut. This is more rosewood, but that's fine. I'm gonna sand the excess off. And then once it gets varnished, and with it being close enough to the wall, it really shouldn't draw too much attention. And I've gotten spousal approval to go this route, so that's no concern stuff for me. Now that the first coat's dry, I'm just giving this a very light hand sanding. I don't trust that little machine that I have to do a gentle and smooth job. This is not, the intention is not to take a whole lot off the surface, it's really just to get it nice and smooth. I think the best way is always to make sure with the cloth, because if there's any unevenness here, the cloth will catch on it. And if that glides across smoothly, then that's then it is sufficient. That's ready for the second coat. Now varnishing the already varnished surface feels a little bit like brushing oil on glass. But I wanted a nice thick protective layer on this wood, considering that it's sitting under the window as the window board. So that's as close to a cold surface in the bathroom as it gets. 3 coats of varnish, now dry, and this is 240 grit. And I'm not really exerting any pressure. Now the way I'm going to put this down is I'll just slot it in and it'll rest there, just kept in place by its own weight. But I thought I'd put this stuff here down, some plasticky foam, just to sound dampen everything, because otherwise it would be quite the drum effect if ever you hit something hard, you know, on its surface. And that is now the view coming in and looking left. I think it's pretty decent. Well, decent enough. And I was looking on Amazon, eBay, etc., for a planter that would fit in here, but because of the measurements here being 96 down by 14.5 centimeters across, there was nothing there to really match that, so I'll have to make my own. So there's my 3 boards for the planter. And the first thing I want to do is I want to tidy up these edges here. That imprint there, those are the board edges, and they're run pretty rough. So I want to clean those up. Now these 3 boards are neatly stacked atop one another. So I'm just going to give them a quick cut. Now I have an edge to measure my 96 centimeters from. Again, I want to make sure that these are nice and neatly stacked so that they're all cut at the same angle. And so my mark here. A square cut at 96 centimeters. That's my cuttage there, very clean. And that's pretty much the height that I wanted for my planter. I want my upstanding bits to sit against the bottom piece like that. But of course, that will make this planter way too wide. So this bottom board here needs to be cut. So that the overall width of this planter is 14.5 centimeters. Now I know that each of these is 18 mil, so 14.5 or 14.5 centimeters minus 2 times 18, 36 millimeters equals 10.9 millimeters. So that is the width that I need to cut this bottom piece to. Because I'll be screwing this together, and because the screw holes are going to be pretty close to the edges. I'm going to pre-drill them and countersink them too, so that I don't end up with any wood getting split. This is why having some proper clamps would be a really good idea. Would make this process a whole lot easier. Anyway, this is what I have, and this is what I shall work with. I've got the first two, quickly countersink them. No, doesn't have to be much more than that. Same there. I'm using 4x40 screws, so 2mm drill bit to pre-drill. I've been thinking back about what I should do first. Bang this thing together and then varnish, or varnish it first and put it together after, but I think I'm going to go with put it together first and then stain and varnish afterwards. There we have it. One planter roughly put together. Now the walls are pretty thick, but the interior width should still afford me enough room to accommodate some artificial plants for the wall garden. Just shy of 11 centimeters. Alright. Moment of truth. Almost like somebody took measurements. Nice. And now to stain that. Now my walnut stained planter is finished, and stained softwood will ever only look like stained softwood. And even though this is supposed to be a walnut stain, this is actual walnut, and the resemblance is very, very minute. The thing with softwood is, because it's fast growing cheap wood, the grain patterns are all wrong. You have really big grains, and that always shows softwood, and it always looks cheap. Whereas this, like the grains are all tight. This is slow growing hardwood, and the grain patterns do speak to that. But anyways, I don't see a chance of me getting 12mm thick walnut plank anywhere, and I'm certainly not gonna plane this down to 12, so I'll just crack on with this. The cracking on, however, or how this cheap looking planter is going to be turned into a wall garden, I think I'm going to pack into the next episode. This one is already long enough. And regarding my long winding speech about grain patterns and not matching colors, it may have something to do with the fact that I did not dab the stain off the wood as I think is practice. I just brushed it on there and let it dry. Whether or not the results would have been any different had I dabbed it correctly, I may never know. But with this thing going to be sitting on the floor and with plants sticking out of it, hopefully I won't notice it too much.